Welcome. I'm M.A. Powers,
I'm JL Powers.
and we are doing Powerssquared Raw and Real number 23.
Wow, we're really getting old.
We are, aren't we? We're going to catch up to our real ages real fast.
Real
I'm going to say
fast.
that real fast.
Real fast.
We're really close.
Couple weeks.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we were going to talk about being cross-cultural parents on
Sure.
this particular episode. And so I think the first thing that I would sort of ask you is, how do you define what's a cross-cultural parent?
I think I put it countercultural, didn't I?
Oh, countercultural. Sorry,
Right,
cross-cultural is wrong.
cross-cultural is good, and I think we all can be cross-cultural. So countercultural has a lot of baggage with it, and
Yes.
that's what I find interesting about the term countercultural, because really, to me, what I think I'm defining as anything as countercultural is that you have a normative, something that's normal that we do with culture, and somebody is usually, and it's almost always consciously, not always, but almost always consciously, they make a choice to say, I'm not going to do it like my culture does it. I'm going to do it a different way. And that is counterculture. And so it's subversive. And that's why people struggle with it. It can be good, especially when you're talking about a culture that is doing terrible things, right? Or is doing harmful things. Being counterculture would then therefore choosing not to do that bad thing and doing something hopefully neutral or good, right? Hopefully good, but at the least neutral. So, and I think that's where it becomes difficult for people to deal with, because when somebody that chooses to do something not like their culture does it, it's often perceived by the society as a whole as a rejection of that culture, right? So if I consider myself to be a countercultural parent, of course, what does that mean? Does that mean in everything, or does that mean in a few things? And I would say no culture is 100% bad. So of course you don't want to be 100% countercultural, because there's a reason for that culture, right? And often it's been developed for good reasons. But I think the other issue, the flip of the coin to that, is that people who are countercultural often have a good grasp, at least, of the part that they're choosing not to follow, and they've actually thought it out and done it. You know, they've thought about their culture instead of just going along with the flow. Right. So that's what I mean by countercultural. And I guess an example for us would be homeschooling, right? Because the vast majority of people either send their kids to public school or send their kids to private school. So in that one tiny narrow sphere, you could consider it as not narrow, depending on how conflated you think school is in the importance of a kid's life. It's either very subversive and very you're basically wrecking people, or it can be considered a positive thing and or neutral. But for us, because there's only 1% of the United States maybe homeschools, that would be considered countercultural, I believe, because there's so few people. But of course, we've had to choose, and this is something that you don't just fall into. You don't just fall into homeschooling. You have to actively make it happen and choose it. So in that sense, I would say we're countercultural.
And consciously.
Sure.
Yeah, I think that, and I'm getting an echo.
I don't hear it.
Okay, well, it'll show up when if you listen to the video later. But anyway, countercultural also is dependent on the community you're in.
Sure.
Because it's not just American culture. It's all these subsets, right? So there's certain subsets of culture within our country that actually do a lot of homeschooling. Christian community. I think I'm going to let you talk.
I'm going to talk right now, and you go in and come out, okay?
Okay.
All right. So, talking about countercultural, I think where things become an issue is when people feel that you are rejecting them personally, because of the life choices that you're making for yourself. But that's not necessarily why people are countercultural. And I personally was just thinking about this as I was doing the dishes, and I think Americans and a lot of people do. They do cherish some countercultural, like the idea of being countercultural, right? Because we have the mythos, which can be good or bad, that you have to do things a new way, right? You can't always do the same thing the same old way, because if you do, you'll never progress. So in a sense, countercultural is a very in American idealism is actually a positive in a lot of ways, because you can't just do something the same old way or you'll just get the same results. So if you want to make a better car, then you have to have an innovation, like Henry Ford making the production lines, and so all of a sudden the cars get cheaper, they get faster to make, and they get better because, or at least maybe not better artistically, but they get to be more reliable because of the introduction of this whole new way of producing things. And so in that sense, being countercultural, I think we do have an idea in the United States, we have an idea that you need to have that. It has to be a part of our culture or we won't have innovation, right?
At the same time, people are suspicious of it.
Sure, for sure.
People are certainly deeply suspicious, I think, of homeschooling.
Sure. I would agree with that. Depends on where you're at. Obviously, where I'm at, I don't think people are particularly suspicious of it, but we've definitely lived in places where people are quite suspicious of it, and definitely look at you strangely when you talk about it.
Yeah, I don't want to talk too much because the echo is still there, and it's going to show up on the video. I'm hearing it even if you aren't.
Okay.
So other forms of countercultural parenting that you want to talk about?
Sure, and I think that gets more to actual cultures within counterculture. Sorry.
No, now it's like got this machine-like weird quality to it.
Well, it's just on your end. I'm sorry. Anyways, yeah, so I guess that gets into a whole other issue that we will talk about maybe another time.
Okay. Oh, look, there's no echo now. Yay. Something gave. Okay, so I want to talk about this a little bit then, because I hadn't really had much of a chance to talk, and the echo was such that I couldn't even think while talking. You know, I feel like, you know, we were talking about the main thing that we're countercultural in, which is homeschooling. And I think that that's true, but I feel like I want to be more countercultural than just that. And I don't, but at the same time, I don't want to offend people. Like there's a lot of different things that I kind of disagree with the way we're doing things in modern American society, but I don't want to offend people. And so that's a balance to strike, you know, is how to be countercultural and also be solid in my opinions of it and not be afraid of offending people, while also still trying to be, you know, kind and receptive and recognizing that just because I've chosen this particular way doesn't mean necessarily that this is a moral issue and that everybody should do it my way. Does that make sense? Okay, so let's, you know, I mean, let's take, you know, people that eat only organic, for example, which is very common in my part of the country. If you know, a lot of places in here, a lot of parenting groups or groups that you might be involved in, if you brought something that wasn't organic, you know, it'd be a problem. Like that's a moral issue for them. And for me, like homeschooling in some senses has become a little bit of a moral issue for me, but at the same time, I don't present it that way to people. I'm like, you got to make the best choice for your family. And I do feel that way. But at the same time, I feel this strong sense of, you know, that public school is actually damaging our kids. All of our kids. Mm-hmm. And so how do I balance this choice of, you know, okay, I respect your decision to do that with your family because that's your individual choice, and maybe your family dynamics and setup are such that you can't homeschool them. But yet, speak out my mind that I think the way we're educating our children is actually fundamentally damaging. And yes, it is damaging your child.
Sure. But I think also, I think one idea behind that too, is it just public school for public school's sake, or is it just the way public schools are run? Because there's a big difference in that, right? Because one is saying, one is saying that this will never ever work, and the other is saying it's just the way the system is flawed, right?
That's a good.
And I agree with you. I mean, some of the reasons, some of the things that I have noticed about the life choices that I have made weren't the reasons why I made those choices in the first place, but now I see them as being good choices, right? And interesting things, like the fact, I think both of us are a little countercultural beyond, and this gets into homeschooling a little bit, but beyond that, and that is, we believe that our kids should have space and be bored, and that they can have nothing to do, and that's fine. We shouldn't have to plan every minute of their day, right? And they don't have to be having something educational happening to them at every second, because you don't learn something unless you do it yourself, and you don't do it yourself unless you're given space to do something and come up with it. Like all of those. And boredom, you're not creative without boredom.
Right. Yeah, no, just as an example, Nesta in the last couple of weeks has started creating his own business.
Right.
He started off by trying to make little comics.
Right.
He was having trouble selling those in the neighborhood. Right. So he started making jewelry. And he started making little bracelets. Actually, Gracie's going to get one for her birthday. But he's doing quite a good job. And he's already had 5 orders outside of me because he's doing a good job. And that's all because, yeah, he's got lots of time to be bored. He really does.
Right. That's how we didn't have a TV growing up, and some days I question my own life choices on having one, because I do have one. But I mean, when I got bored, I played the piano, I played the guitar, and now I can play the guitar and the piano, and I can play them pretty well. I'm not great, but I'm not horrible, and that was all because I was bored. So, but that's a life choice. But I think getting back to the countercultural aspect of life is that it's easy for me to judge other people when they are being countercultural in a way that I don't agree with. But I think instead of being judgmental, I should have a good reason why, and not just the knee-jerk reasons why, because we see what happens when people have a knee-jerk reaction to our own countercultural choices. And it's hard. It's just as hard, I think, for people to encounter somebody who's truly living a countercultural life for a moral reason as it is to be the person living the countercultural life. It's just as hard for both groups, because because then it makes you question your own choices or lack of choices. And I think that that's what really is difficult. It's almost more difficult to see a family and see how that they do something and kind of wish that you were doing it that way, but not seeing any way that you can do it that way. Right?
Yeah.
It's easy to be defensive. So I think both sides, it gets difficult for. I see this with music like all the time, which is just ridiculous, right? Good music is good music, just flat out, okay? Some people don't like hip hop. They just don't like it. They never will like it. But that doesn't mean it's bad. It's really good. It's just not your music, all right? And classical music is really, really good. It bores the living daylights out of me. I will never sit down and actively listen to classical music. That doesn't mean it's horrible or bad. It's just different. And so I think those are any new form that comes into our life. Artistic form is countercultural and makes people nervous and unexpected, you know.
Yeah, again, I think the thing that it comes down to is the thing that you're doing that's different from the rest of the culture. Is it a moral issue?
Right, true.
A health issue? Or just a preference? And those are very different things. And sometimes people conflate something that's just a personal preference,
right,
elevate it to a moral issue.
Sure.
And sometimes it really is a moral issue. And so I think those are things that we just have to think about in terms of the choices that we make and how we present them to others.
Good. Well, I think that's a good stopping space.
All right.
All right. This has been another serious Raw and Real, and we'll seriously keep working out our own issues in front of everybody who happens to stumble onto our videos.
Don't forget to visit us at www.powerssquared.com.
I see you later. This is M.A. Powers.
JL Powers.
Bye.